Story time about how I catfished my boyfriend. I'd been dating my boyfriend Ben for around a year. We were really happy and he even moved in with me in my apartment. Everything was going great and I thought he could be the one. However, one day my friend Lacey sent me a screenshot of my boyfriend on a dating app. At first, I was hoping that maybe it was an old account. I didn't want to jump to conclusions if it was from before we started dating. The pictures that he had on the account didn't seem to be recent ones. I wanted to ask him about it and I almost did, but I had to be sure that he wasn't trying to play me. I called my friend Lacey and told her to super like him on the app. She's really pretty and they've never met, so I knew that he would match with her if he was still active on the app. After a few days, nothing happened. He hadn't matched or messaged her. I was so relieved that I even bought him a new jersey I knew he'd been wanting. I felt dumb even questioning his loyalty until I got an update from Lacey a few days later. He had matched with her on the dating app and messaged her. I was so mad I was seeing red. I was so close to going into the next room and going off on him, but I decided that I wanted to get back at him in a different way. I called Lacey and explained to her that I wanted to set him up and asked for her login information on the app, which she gave me. This is when things got interesting. Part 2 of how I catfished my boyfriend. I downloaded the dating app, logged into Lacey's account, and began messaging Ben pretending to be her. I asked him if he was single, to which he said of course. He was being super flirty and saying some of the sweet things to her that he said to me. I told him I wanted to set up a date and meet, and he immediately agreed. It was on a day that I knew he was scheduled to work. When the day came, he lied to me and told me that he was going to work and might have to stay late. I met up with Lacey and a few of my other girlfriends and we got ready to catch him in the act. I messaged him and gave him Lacey's address where we were waiting for him. He messaged back when he arrived and Lacey went to the door and let him in. He walked in and saw me and all my friends and his jaw hit the floor. If anyone's ever seen a ghost, I'd imagine they looked like him when he walked in and saw us. He was so shocked and terrified, he just stood there not knowing what to say. The look on his face of complete guilt and shame was so gratifying. My friends and I immediately started yelling at him, calling him every name in the book, while some of my friends had their phones out recording us catching him red-handed. We pushed him out of the house, yelling at him while he took the walk of shame back to his car. We spent the rest of the evening back at my place getting all of his stuff out of my apartment. Hopefully he thinks twice about cheating on any girl again.
Story time about how my ex caught me cheating on him.
My ex was the biggest player in my college. All the girls knew him and everyone warned me not to hang out with him. Of course I didn't listen. He asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes, of course. We had been going out for a few months, but every time he would go to a frat party, I would hear from someone else that he had been cheating on me or that he was trying to hook up with other girls. And I would ask him about it, he would absolutely deny it and say that people were just trying to separate us because they were envious of our relationship. I believed him a little bit, but something told me I shouldn't. So of course I decided to check his messages and guess what? I found a bunch of messages between him and girls that he went to class with. I confronted him and he denied everything. He said those were not his messages and that I was probably making things up. He deleted the messages before I could take screenshots. It was around the time of my birthday and I was planning a party and I told him he couldn't come to my party because I was upset at him. I made sure to invite a friend of his to my party who I knew had a crush on me. So his friend and I got really cozy at my party. We started hanging out every single day after come back from part 2. So my cheating boyfriend didn't show up to my birthday party. Instead, I invited one of his friends who I knew had a crush on me. Let's call him Bob. Well, Bob and I started hanging out all the time. Behind my boyfriend's back, of course. My boyfriend and I would hang out less and less. Well, Bob started catching feelings and he asked me to break up with my boyfriend and to basically come clean to him. And I said no. I had no intention of leaving my boyfriend. I just wanted to get revenge. And honestly, it felt really good to do that. Bob got really upset because I didn't want to break up with my boyfriend and he went off. I started hearing rumors around the school about me hooking up with Bob. My boyfriend asked me about it and I said, I don't know where that's coming from. I haven't hooked up with anyone. My boyfriend didn't believe me. My boyfriend went to a party that night and he didn't invite me, which of course, you know what that means. I asked Bob if we could hang out, so I went over to his place. We're on his couch kissing and my boyfriend comes in through the door. Part 3. So while I'm hooking up with Bob on his couch, my boyfriend walks in through the door. Bob got up from the couch and went and stood next to my boyfriend. And my boyfriend just begins to say, I knew that you were cheating on me. You see, I knew it. Rumors were true. And I said, well, you've been cheating on me for months since we started dating. Then Bob pipes up and says, look, I'm sorry I did this to you, but it had to be done. I slowly started to realize that I had been set up by both of them. I went back to my dorm and I didn't speak to them for a few days. My boyfriend was calling and begging me to get back with him. He said he would forgive me for the cheating if I forgave him for cheating on me. But Bob was also messaging me asking me to be his girlfriend. He said he'd never cheat on me like my boyfriend did and that he really had feelings for me. Well, I didn't get back with my boyfriend, but we're hooking up. And I'm still hooking up with Bob too, but I made a promise that he wouldn't tell my ex. I did find out that my ex cheated on me with 15 girls. And that's on toxic.
Part 1 story time about how my own mother was preventing me from having kids. This story is anonymous. Not gonna lie, in high school, your girl was kind of fast. My mom and I, we did not have the best relationship. She always called me a whore and she told me she was gonna put me on birth control as soon as she got good insurance. So sooner than later, I was on birth control. I snuck around with all types of dudes. I thought being on birth control gave me a pass to do whatever I wanted. And my mom never stopped me. She just didn't want to be bothered by me. So as some years went on, boom, I was in college. So I met this guy, Jared, and he was perfect. Me and my mother were never close, so she didn't think I changed since high school. So after college was over, I brought Jared home to meet my parents. My mom liked him and everything, but then she pulled me aside and told me something later. My mom then told me, you need to stay your ass on birth control. I don't care who you meet. Knowing how you are, you might cheat on him and have babies with everybody on campus. That was hurtful, but I already made up my mind to get off. Like for part 2. Part 2 story time about how my mother was preventing me from having kids. This story is anonymous. So I told my mom, no matter what she thought, I made up my mind already. I'm off birth control. So she's like, yeah, we'll see about that. I'm like, we ain't gonna see about nothing. I'm off. So Jared and I decided to stay with my mom until we found jobs, apartments, etc. Due to some things Jared did when he was a teenager, it was making it hard for him to get a job. Long story short, we were there for a few years. As soon as we graduated college, we had been trying to have a baby, and it just wasn't working. I told my mom about it, but she said, don't waste your time going to the hospital. The only reason you can't have kids is because you're stressed out. So we kept trying some months later, but after a while I was tired of it. I snuck and went to the hospital. The doctors ran some tests, and they then told me I was on a hormonal birth control. I sped my ass home so fast. I told my mom what the doctors told me, and then she confessed that she was crushing it up in my food every day. I had never felt so betrayed. And since that was very much illegal, best believe she went and did time. 6 months later, I was pregnant.
Part 1 of how my best friend's husband tried to hook up with me. 2 of my closest friends are a married couple, Nicole and Aaron. I've known them for years and they're expecting their first baby in a few months. We're all really close and I could see them being in my life forever. That was until Aaron started acting weird. One morning I woke up with a text from Aaron that said, I've always been attracted to you and you've been on my mind a lot lately. I was shocked. He's never tried to go there with me before and I never thought he would. I didn't know what to do and I just stared at my phone in disbelief for about 20 minutes. When I messaged back and confronted him about it, he told me that he got really drunk last night and didn't mean any of it. He begged me not to tell Nicole and swore that it would never happen again. He continued to convince me by saying how the baby was due in a few months and this would ruin everything. I decided to let it go and told him I don't ever want it to happen again. I didn't want to break up their marriage or their baby to have to grow up without a father. I wanted to believe that it was just a drunken mistake and we could all still be friends. But in the back of my mind, I knew I should have told Nicole. And that feeling turned out to be right because it only got worse from here. Part 2 of how my best friend's husband tried to hook up with me. A few weeks after the drunken text incident, I received a Snapchat from Aaron one night. I opened it and it was the one thing that girls never want to get. The infamous unsolicited D-pic. I could not believe that this guy really sent me something like this after begging me not to tell his wife about the previous flirty text message. Before even replying, I had already made up my mind and I was going to tell Nicole. After I told him I was going to tell Nicole, he tried to convince me that he sent the picture by mistake. I replayed the snap and screenshotted it for evidence to show Nicole. Before I could reply again, he messaged me back and said, "Replaying a screenshot, huh? You must have really liked what you saw." I was fuming and furious that he would even think for a second that I was interested in his disgusted naked selfie. I immediately sent the screenshot to Nicole and told her what happened. I also explained what had happened before. She ended up kicking him out of their apartment that same night. Then she asked me to come over and we spent the evening packing up Aaron's stuff and putting it on the curb. I guess the next morning Aaron hadn't gotten his stuff fast enough and it was garbage day. Nicole and I are still best friends to this day.
Story time about how I shot my boyfriend's eggplant. I was a sophomore in college at this time with my boyfriend Michael and my best friend Serenity. One day my best friend Serenity buzzed down my college dorm room and was crying hysterically. She was telling me she just came back from the doctors and got terrible news. Her boyfriend Brad cheated on her and gave her herpes. She felt so embarrassed and I promised her I wouldn't tell anybody. So I told my boyfriend that Serenity was starting to have relationship problems and we should probably be there for her more. So every now and then Michael would say, "Hey babe, I'm going to go check on Serenity," and he would hang out with her by herself, which I had absolutely no problem with. But then later on, they started to hang out without me without even telling me that they were hanging out. I honestly felt like I had nothing to worry about knowing the circumstances. And my boyfriend, he was not a cheater. So I thought. So one day I was taking a shower and as I was washing down there, stuff started to burn. I hopped out of the shower and sat on the toilet to take a good look and I had bumps. These were not razor bumps, they were bumps. So I went to my doctor immediately, like for part 2. This is part 2 about how I shot my boyfriend's eggplant. So like I said in part 1, I went to the doctors so quick. Once they tested me for everything, they told me that I should have my results in about 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days later exactly, I got my results. I had herpes. Once I read that I tested positive, I knew exactly where it came from. So I called my boyfriend and I said, "Hey, where are you?" He goes, "Oh, I was just checking on Serenity again." I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go to class now." I was lying. I was on my way to see what the hell they were doing. So once I get to Serenity's, I bust down the door and you guessed it, they were doing it. So Michael hops off Serenity trying to run to me, apologizing, "Babe, I'm so sorry." I had my dad's gun and I shot his eggplant. I was just like, "You won't be needing that anymore because boo, you got herpes." He would have never slept with her if he knew she had herpes, but that just exposed the fact that he's a cheater. Oh, and for Serenity, I whooped that ass. Herpes was the last thing she was worried about. If my life was going to be ruined, then so was theirs. Story time about how I slept with my own dad. By the way, this story is anonymous. Now, keep in mind, I never knew who my dad was from birth, but I knew he lived in the same state as me. So I was a senior in college, and it was getting so hard for me to graduate. So one day I went in early to speak with our professor about the homework, and we had a new professor. I was so upset because our other professor was so lenient with me. He understood everything. I was going to have to catch this new dude up on everything. I was hoping he wasn't strict, but just like I thought, he was extremely strict. He went by Professor Tom, which was his first name because he said it made him feel old to go by his last. So graduation started coming up, and I was talking to my best friend like, girl, what should I do? I was failing so many of my classes. It was just so hard. Then when I told her we had a new professor, she was like, oh, girl, you screwed. So once me and her got to class the next day, she was like, oh, girl, he is cute. She's like, you know what you're going to have to do by the end of the semester if you're still failing, right? Like for part 2. Part 2, story time about how I slept with my biological father. By the way, this story is very anonymous. So my best friend was suggesting that I had to sleep with him to pass my classes. I did not want to take it there, but by the way my grades was looking, I had no choice. So I asked him to start tutoring me after classes. He agreed to tutor me, and I got a lot closer to him. So one day I came in for tutoring, and I locked the door. I told him I had a surprise for him just to show appreciation for him helping me. He was like, and what is that? Long story short, we did the do on his desk. We both had a great time. After that, my grades were not a problem. So the next day I was freaking out telling my best friend everything that happened. And she was kind of happy for me. So after classes, I went home and my mom told me my dad was coming over for dinner. She was like, honey, he's moved closer to us so he can get closer to you. She goes, he actually just started teaching after college. My stomach hit the floor. So I hear someone knock on the door and I am sweating. She opens the door. It's my professor. I blacked out and I don't remember anything after that.